All right, we have made it to week 5 of our lectures. We have considered the Old Testament, its historical, theological, exegetical context. We've discussed what the Bible is and how we got the Bible. And now we move to the New Testament. And I'm so excited to be able to go over this with you. And so before we dive into the Gospels, Acts, etc., I want to go ahead and just place us within the chronological and historical context of the New Testament. Let's get started. All right, so beginning with our chronological change. So we can see here that on the left hand side we have world events, and on the right side we have local events. That's events pertaining to the land of Israel. But on the left, you'll see again these world events, and we talked a little bit about this with Ezra and Nehemiah. 539, 538, that time, Persia defeats Babylon and dominates 250 years. This is significant. It's not insignificant. But it's important because with the Persians' defeat of Babylon, that's what enables the Jews to return to their homeland. Again, Cyrus defeats Babylon and has a decree, and this enables the Jews to return to their homeland. Well, you can see that they dominate for about 250 years, but then come the Greeks. They defeat the Persians and they dominate a long time, but then here comes big bad Rome, and they defeat the Greeks and they dominate a long, long, long time. And you can see on the right here we have our local events, so we should be familiar with this. 586, right? The temple is destroyed. The return to Judah begins in 538 because of the decree of Cyrus. Again, the Persians defeat the Babylonians. New temples rebuild, Prophet Malachi, and then Nehemiah rebuilds the wall in 444 BC. And so that raises the question, right? Well, if Malachi at least is the last book that we have in our Protestant canon, and in the Hebrew canon, it's Chronicles, which I only talked a little bit about, but really Ezra and Nehemiah. You have all of this space, hundreds of years, between the conclusion of the Hebrew canon and the events of the New Testament. Well, what kind of happens between that period is not unimportant, and it lays the groundwork for the events of the New Testament. And so here's a little preview, just kind of, getting us in touch with this. So again, we've talked about this a little bit, but you can see here that between 331 to 167 BC, you have this period of Hellenization. And this is where really the Greek language, Greek ideas, Greek religion spread through Alexander the Great and his successors. And this significantly impacted Israel, or the land of Judah, because the Greeks conquered Judah. And I don't know if I remember but I said here they conquered the Persians, the Greeks do. And because Persia was under the control or Israel was under the control of Persia, well, guess what? The Jews then were under the control of the Greeks. And you can see here in 167 to about 63 BC, there's this Jewish period of self-rule. The Jews, at least from the time they returned to the land in 530-ish, 538, though they're back in the land, they're still under the rule of somebody. Whether it is the Persians and then the Greeks, they're under the authority of another nation. And yet in 167, there's this period of revolt led by the Maccabees and then the Hasmoneans, where there's this Jewish period of where they're not under the shackles of anybody. Well, that quickly changes with Rome in 63 BC. And Rome occupies Judea, and you can see here that they set up client kings. So Herod the Great, he's assigned as a client king, and this is really important because it is going to be his children who rule this land. And in fact, when we read the Gospels, we'll see that there is a Herod. When we read the book of Acts, there's a Herod, another Herod, right? So the events of the Roman occupation have an gigantic impact on the events of the New Testament and the book of Acts, because the Jews, they're not really free. They're under the authority of another. And so let's go ahead and keep going here. But so that's kind of, again, just kind of broad impact, or broad overview. And this leads us to this topic of the diaspora. So, have you ever wondered why Paul encounters so many Jews throughout the Mediterranean world? Or perhaps why Jesus and his family fled to Egypt? Now, Jesus and his family led to Egypt. That is prophetical. Out of Egypt I call my son. Jesus fulfills that. But why or how do why are there so many Jews spread across the Mediterranean and even in Africa when I thought their homeland was Israel? Well, one answer is this thing called the diaspora, meaning the dispersion or scattering. So the Jewish diaspora refers to the scattering of Jews beyond the region of Israel to various parts of the ancient world. So we can think about this, right? In 722, the northern kingdom is exiled by the Assyrians. Some of them stay, but a lot of them are deported to other places. Same with Babylon. They're taken to different places. We can think about the book of Esther that takes place in Susa. That's not Israel. All of these Jews are taken and they're put into different places. And we even see this, for example, in the book of Jeremiah. There's Jews who are heading to Egypt, which is not insignificant because Jesus goes to Egypt. Probably one reason for that, again, beside biblical prophecy, is there's a large amount of Jews there. It's also where the Septuagint was written, which we've talked about a little bit. And then in AD 70, when Rome destroys Jerusalem, what we have is, all right, there's more Jews who are scattered. So very significant, this diaspora event of Jews being dispersed across the ancient world. And so what about a theological context of the Roman world before I show a map? Well, there's a lot we can say here, theological, philosophical context, but I just have four that I think are significant. One, paganism. Ancients were profoundly religious and they were profoundly paganistic. Outside of the Jews, who are probably dispersed throughout the ancient world, there are not monotheists probably. Maybe in Egypt at a certain time, but in general, it's paganistic, and these pagans are very religious with sacrificial systems. And related to that, we also have something called emperor worship. And this is incredibly important for understanding, for sure, the book of Revelation, but also I think the book of John. Why is it significant that Thomas called Jesus my Lord and my God? Well, what we have here is that after the death of Augustus in AD 14, you have the institution of emperor worship. Caligula, Nero, Domitian, they all claim divine status while ruling. So you can immediately see the conflict between worshiping Jesus and the Roman emperors. There's a clear conflict established. You worship Jesus or the Roman emperors. There's no in between. There's no synchronism. And related to religions, we can see here there's a lot of mystery religions. The Greeks, Egyptians, Oriental religions. They're present everywhere, and they emphasized secrecy. We see, I think, a picture of this perhaps in First John with Gnosticism. But just like in our day, there's also different philosophies that are around. You have Epicureanism, pleasure seekers. What is the meaning of life? It is to just indulge in pleasure, and not many things have changed, quite frankly. You have Stoicism, just this materialistic, hey, whatever happens, happens. But then you also have cynicism, which is more like we're going to live just off of bare means, right? So you have different religions, you have emperor worship, you have secret religions, you have different philosophies, all in the waters, the Mediterranean waters, so to speak. And here we can see a little picture I have right here of the Pax Romana. And that just means Roman peace. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you can see this whole gigantic swab of land that was dominated by the Romans. To the right, we have little Judea, right? But you can see here that what enables Paul's travels or etc. is really that there is one team in charge, and that is the Romans. And so with that, we'll go ahead and transition now to talking about the Gospels.